The Ransom of Mercy Carter, Chapter 6, Kanawake, St. Lawrence River, French Canada, April 10th, 1704, temperature 44 degrees. The dugout pulled up to a stone jetty in an Indian town, out of which Indian women and children poured. For a month, Mercy had prayed to reach the end of the journey, and all she wanted now was to be back in the wilderness with only cold and hunger to worry about. People flooded over the captives, an entire town running like water over the fields and into the jetty, raising their arms in proud salute. Mercy tried not to show her terror. Why had the Indians taken captives? What would happen next? Lord, Lord, she said, asking him to be with her and keep her brave. Since her mother had died, Mercy had been an adult in her household, bringing up her brothers, making meals, caring for babies. She had not thought of herself as a child, nor had she been one. Now, she knew herself to be 11 years old, small and thin and easily defeated. She could not imagine what these alien people planned to do with her. Please stop here and answer question 1. She looked to Tonahorns for help, but he did not glance at her. The man who had lifted her over creeks and fed her parched corn did not exist in front of his people. Mercy had forgotten that what Tonahorns really was a triumphant warrior returning home. Tonahorns held up scalps. The Wakwanakin held up scalps. Otter and Great Sky and Cold Sun held up scalps. Eben could not stifle a groan, and Sarah Hoyt, who was closer to Eben than Mercy, put her hand lightly over his. One of the scalps was the heavily braided chestnut red hair of Eben's older sister. The crowd of women and boys and old men whooped continually. It was not the same sound as the howls during the assault. If screams were speech, this was different speech, but it was equally frightening. "They're busy," whispered Ruth. "Let's just paddle away." Joseph and Eben managed to laugh. The dugout was tied to the wharf, and there were dozens of warriors within a few yards. Eben did not want to be dragged out of the boat, so he was the first to step onto the jetty. He coaxed the girls to follow him. "Don't look at their faces," he said quietly. "Look beyond them, at the village." The land sloped gently up from the St. Lawrence River, and the village, much larger than Deerfield, was filled with long, narrow houses with rounded roofs and no windows. The town was enclosed on 3 sides by a stockade, and while the river formed a 4th side for protection. Beyond the town, muddy and patchy with old snow, were fields for corn. To the east of the town were stone buildings, quite beautiful and quite high. In Deerfield, stone was for foundations and wood was for buildings. Alongside one of the stone houses stood French soldiers, and above their heads flew a French flag. Its graceful fleur-de-lis snapped lightly in the wind. Mercy's heart hurt. She was truly and fully defeated. This was enemy territory. In this place she had 2 enemies, the French and the Indians. The English flag with its fierce lions she might never see again. The crowd descended on her, fingers exploring her yellow hair, black eyes staring into the blue of her own. Mercy got separated from the other captives. She prayed for them. For Eliza to stay stupefied so she did not know what was happening. For Ruth to stay quiet so she did not make things worse. For Sarah to stay brave, but Sarah would do that without Mercy's prayers. "Lord God," she prayed. And outside the stockade, between the village and the garrison, Mercy saw a church. She had known that these were praying Indians, but she had not realized there would be a church. Puritans did not have churches. No building made by man could be sacred. They had meeting houses and used them to discuss broken fences or ammunition shortages as well as to worship. Made of stone, gray and strong and serious, the church was where it should be, on a hill and closer to heaven. The roof was sharply pointed, as a roof was meant to be, instead of rounded like those of the Indian houses. On its peak was a cross. Mercy fixed her eyes on the cross. She would never wear one, like Tonahorns, which would be a sin, but if she happened to see the cross in the sky, that would be God's will. "Lord, stay with me," prayed Mercy Carter. There were speeches, none of which Mercy could follow. There were presentations of prizes taken from Deerfield, distributed with much hollering and stomping. There went the flintlock musket Sarah had held with her father's initials carved in the wood. There went the packet of Benny's fish hooks and the pewter cider mug that belonged to the Catlins. There was the shiny dark red quilt stitched in England by Eben's grandmother, countless tiny stitches forming a garden of puffy flowers and climbing vines. Indian women exclaimed over it. They knew what it was to put that many stitches into cloth. One of the prizes was Joseph. In his Indian clothes, you could hardly tell he was English, and they walked him through the crowd to be petted and stroked. People drifted up and wandered off, and Mercy caught a glimpse of Joseph's sister Rebecca standing on the edge of the crowd with 2 Indian women, and there, far to the rear, Eunice Williams, so she had not fallen off her sled. The other parties must have moved more quickly, found more game perhaps, or taken a better route. And there was Sally Burt, still huge, and her husband. Who would have thought Sally could survive? Mercy caught their eyes, one by one. Be brave, they seemed to say. It's not so bad. But for Eben, who in height and weight and strength was a man, it was going to be so bad. Tana Horrins and Thorpe Wannikin walked off the jetty to smoke and laugh with warriors they had not seen in weeks. Then the captives were prodded out into the packed, dirty snow and arranged in a line. From here, Mercy could see that this town was far more of a fort than Deerfield. Not only was the soldiers' garrison up high and made of stone so it could never burn, but hanging over the water were 3 cannon, black holes staring grimly. Were the English ever to be so foolish as to sail north from Boston, hoping to defeat the French here? Their ships would be blown to pieces. The Indians drew back, forming lines of their own, and the captives knew this was the moment. Eben was taking deep breaths, trying to prepare himself. Sarah was fighting tears. They knew better to cry, even Ruth. They must show as little emotion as possible. Please stop here and answer question 2. It's all right, said Eben quietly to the girls. It evens the score. Only God can do that, whispered Ruth, as if she had forgotten Molly and Mary and Hitty, as if she did not know the agony in Eben's heart. It was torture enough to have to witness the slaughter of our families, not to mention marching 300 miles in winter. How dare they do anything else? Sarah disagreed. That wasn't torture. For the Indians, it was routine. But Indians were not drawing back to demonstrate their cruelty on Eben's flesh. They were showing respect for a man slowly approaching over the trampled snow. Mercy knew it had to be a man because of the silver-threaded black beard, and because of the beard she also knew he was not Indian. They did not have beards, but the man wore a gown like a woman, and its black hem trailed and flowed where the snow rose and dipped. A Catholic priest, whispered Ruth. He prays to a pope instead of to God. He is going to hell. Do not speak if he talks to you. Do not meet his eyes. Naturally, they wanted to study a man who was going to hell, and even Ruth ended up staring. His beard had not been left to grow by itself, the way Deerfield men wore theirs, some patchy, some full or curly. His was clipped short and gave him dignity. The priest's belt seemed to be made of silver and gold, tasseled like corn. On his chest hung a cross studded with brighter beads than anything Mercy had ever seen, like ice cut in chips, glittering with color. Precious jewels, exclaimed Ruth. So that's what they look like. Isaiah 61:10, she quoted. As a bride adorneth herself with the jewels. Mercy's mother had always quoted chapter and verse. She knew the Bible as well as Mr. Williams, but Mother had been a Puritan bride, and no Puritan bride ever adorned herself with jewels. Please stop here and answer question 3. The priest greeted the returning warriors, and to the astonishment of the captives, Tana Horns and Thorpe Wannikin, Otter and Great Sky and Cold Sun knelt before him. The priest prayed in a language the children did not recognize. It was not Mohawk, it was not English, and it had none of the sounds of French. What could it be? The priest extended his cross to the end of its heavy gold chain, and each warrior, as he rose to his feet, kissed the cross. Mercy was aghast. The crowd bowed their heads while the priest moved his arm in magical circles to finish his show. He is going to hell, thought Mercy. And then not only did the Catholic priest speak to the captives, he spoke in English. My children, do not be afraid. I am Father Muriel. I will be your priest. Were you hard used on your march up north? Did you suffer much? A Frenchman cared if we were all right? A Frenchman who was a sinner, who had a pope? They will not treat you so harshly now, said the priest. Already your people will be trying to arrange your ransom. You will stay here for the time being. I will try to arrange your purchase by good French families. Your Indians have already sold one of you to me. He put his hand on Eliza's hair, an odd, open palm gesture, which also seemed full of magic, as one calling on his pope to enter Eliza. Mercy shivered. You will live with the nuns in Montreal, Father Muriel said to Eliza. His voice was gentle, so perhaps he had been told her history. I will take you for now. For the rest, I will see you every week when I come to say Mass, and you will tell me if you need me." Mercy locked her fingers together lest she throw her arms around his hidden knees and beg to be taken also. She touched his robe, even though Ruth would yell at her for that, and said, "What are nuns, sir? Will Eliza be safe? She isn't very well. Will they take care of her? She doesn't talk very often. Will they be kind?" Behind his beard, she could see a hint of a smile. "And what is your name?" "Mercy Carter." "Marie Cartier," he said in French. "Marie Cartier," Mercy repeated, as she had repeated syllables to learn Mohawk. "I will tell the nuns what you have said," he went on in English, "and yes, they will be kind." The priest lifted his hand and moved it over Mercy's head in the magical pattern he had used for the crowd. Please stop here and answer question 4. Ruth and Sarah backed away horrified. "Is that the work of the devil?" whispered Mercy. "How would she get rid of it?" "It is the sign of the cross. I am blessing you. See?" He did it again. "I am drawing a picture of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. His peace will go with you." He turned to bless the others, arm and palm still up, and Ruth said fiercely, "Do not do that again. I will leap into the river and wash it off if you try to paint your cross over me." He looked at Ruth tenderly. "The current is strong. Do you hear roaring? Rapids are downstream. You would be dashed against the rocks. Pray to the Lord for patience, and he will bring you home." What did Ruth possess? Mercy wanted to know, that no matter how rudely she spoke, everybody liked her for it. Father Muriel headed back toward his stone buildings, pausing to paint the cross above every Indian who spoke to him. He walked more slowly than an Englishman would have. Deerfield men, including the minister, had crops to plant and animals to tend, weather to fend off, and firewood to lay in. Deerfield men were in a hurry. Father Muriel floated like a hawk on the wind. A hawk, of course, with sharp eyes and sharper beak, would soon drop, going for the kill. Mercy found herself escorted by a grown woman on either side of her. Where was Horrens? Had he given her away? Sold her? Lost interest? Did she have to do this alone? If only she could hold Daniel while she walked here. Where was Daniel? Was he safe? Row after row of windowless bark huts spread out before her. Doors were hanging flaps of skin, and instead of chimneys, there were holes in the roof. Smoke rose in lazy curls. Her heart burst with worrying about Sam and John and Benny. Had her brothers gone alone into some Indian town like this? Did they have each other? Had they been sold or abandoned, or, like Joseph, were they being made much of and given honorable names such as Sowingen? Please stop here and answer question 5. Could Father Muriel really call the peace of the Lord into her heart? She certainly needed it. Finally, the women stopped, lifting a deerskin door and they and she ducked into one of the long houses. Inside, it was smoky from 2 bright fires, full of shadows thrown by the flames. But its frame of saplings was hung with the same things as home: smoked meat, dried corn, leggings, a days, pistols, buckets, and many plates. She wondered briefly how you could hang plates, but was too tired to consider it very long. It was blessedly warm inside and smelled of herbs and wood smoke. From a tripod over the fire hung an iron kettle filled with stew. She could see beans and meat and corn in the gravy and was so overwhelmed by hunger she was ready to use her bare hand for a spoon. One of the women filled a ladle with stew for Mercy, who took it in trembling hands and swallowed desperately. It was delicious. She was so glad to taste real food instead of gnawing bones over a wilderness fire. So glad to have something with ingredients, a mixture, a variety. She was glad to be among women. She ate standing up, hoping for a second helping, but the women shook their heads. They guided her to a sort of shelf piled with furs and blankets. When she was seated, they handed her a corn cake. It was a plain flat patty with maple syrup dribbled over it, and Mercy had never eaten anything so wonderful. She had had no bread for so long. Then they peeled away her filthy clothing. She was too tired to be modest, and when they washed her with hot water and pulled a long Indian tunic over her, the soft deerskin was so clean, so welcome. They coaxed her to lie down on the shelf and tucked her in as so long as she had tucked Sam and John and Benny and Tommy in. Mercy had not slept in a bed for over a month, and a roof above her head. When you lived with nothing between you and the weather, you were indeed savage, and so it took savagery to stay alive. But a roof and walls? You could breathe again, sleep without terror. A hideous smell filled the room, and she jerked upright, but it was medicine, a salve they rubbed into the raw skin and cracking scabs of her feet. Just as she closed her eyes to tumble into real sleep, she saw the many plates swaying slightly in the updraft from the fire. They were scalps. When she woke up, Mercy could not guess from the dim smoky light what time of day it might be. The woman who had given her the stew was stirring food in the same pot. A little girl was playing house on the floor, making tiny lodges out of twigs and bark shreds, and 2 men were playing a game with stones over a pattern drawn on the dirt floor. I will pray, she told herself. I will eat breakfast, then I will walk out of here and go find the others. I'll talk to Sarah and Joseph. I'll see how Eunice did on her trip. I'll find Rebecca Kellogg and Sally Burt and see if they know where John and Benny and Sam are. It took courage to move the blanket away, swing her legs around and meet their eyes. She had thought Tana Horns would be here, not 4 staring strangers and a gap-toothed little girl. How fair was it that this little girl lived, while Mara and Tommy and Molly and Mary and Hitty did not? Mercy pulled her moccasins on. The salve had worked. Her feet felt much better. Everything will be all right. The priest had said so. He had said that even now her people were working on ransom. So this was temporary. She need only cooperate for a while. She would go home. The word home split into pieces. She could not fathom what home might consist of now. Lord, Lord, she said, and he quieted her heart and told her to put trust in him. Please stop here and answer question 6. Leaving the spoon in the kettle, the woman took Mercy's hand and led her outside into softly falling snow. They walked between several houses and past a wide open space that must be a common garden come spring, and then the woman stood over a trench, lifting her skirt and made water. Mercy closed her eyes with the horror of doing this so publicly, but there was no other choice, so she did the same, washing herself with snow, and then they went back into the house. After several corn cakes, Mercy felt ready to face the day until she saw that one of the men was wearing her father's best shirt, the bright white blouse with ruffles he saved for Sunday. The ruffles mother had sewn with such affection evening after evening as father took his turn telling stories and the boys fell asleep by the fire. Mercy tried to find a place to look where nothing would upset her. There was no such place. Tana Horns appeared in the door, but Mercy hated him now and hardly looked his way. He didn't notice. He talked with the woman who had ladled out the stew, and then Tana Horns left. The woman took Mercy's hand and led her from house once more. Tana Horns had already vanished. Please stop here and answer question 7. Ruth was right about everything, thought Mercy. We're going to be slaves, helping with Indian babies and staring up at Indian ceilings. Nistenha, said the woman, tapping herself to show that was her name. Nistena, Mercy repeated dully. Munanak, said Nistena, tapping Mercy. Munanak, agreed Mercy. Please stop here and answer question 8. Nistena stopped only 3 houses away, lifted the flap, and ducked inside. Sally Burt lay on rugs by the fire, in labor. Oh, Mercy, she cried. Oh, thank God. Hold my hand. I beg them to send for you. For me, thought Mercy, truly honored. Not for Sarah, not for Ruth, who are older and wiser, but for me? So Mercy sat, holding Sally's 2 hands, while Nistena and the other women helped and talked in their language and gave Sally medicine to drink. I told myself I wouldn't scream, Sally told Mercy. No matter how much it hurts, I'm not going to scream. Indian women probably grunt once and they're done. Sally and Mercy giggled, although Mercy was terrified. In spite of all the births happening all the time in Deerfield, she had never seen one. Women dealt with it, while children and fathers stayed far away. But this was Sally's first, and she did not know what it would be like either. Oh, no, said Sally. Oh, no, Mercy, it hurts so much. I'm going to scream after all. They giggled again, and Mercy and Sally screamed. Did anybody hear me? Gasped Sally. They could hear you in Boston, said Mercy, and the girls giggled again. But Nistena spoke anxiously and earnestly in Mohawk. Mercy strained to understand because it sounded important, and everything in childbirth was important. She simply could not get the words. From outside the hut came a woman's voice, an English voice, speaking English. Who could it be? Not a Deerfield captive. They couldn't have learned enough Mohawk that fast. "She's telling the mother not to scream," said the voice. "If she screams, her child will be born a coward." Miss Denna put a cylinder of wood in Sally's mouth, and Sally bit down so hard Mercy thought she would break off a tooth, but it absorbed the pain, and Sally did not scream again. By now the longhouse was packed with women, jabbering and offering advice, none of which Miss Denna appeared to want. The room was exceedingly hot. Miss Denna wiped the sweat off Sally's forehead, and 4 rough hours later, without a second scream, Sally Burt was delivered of a boy. Miss Denna lifted the baby, cleaned him, and wrapped him while Mercy stared, awed at the fragility of newborns. They wrapped Sally, too, in a fresh sheet of European cloth and spooned soup into her. When they finally handed her the baby, Sally unwrapped him to check. "Oh, he's beautiful," she cried. "He's perfect. Look at him. Mercy, isn't it wonderful?" "Miss Denna!" cried the women in a chorus. Mercy was surprised. She must have misunderstood the Ladle woman's name. Now every woman in town trooped in to admire the new baby, who was squalling and turning himself redder than any Indian. Among them was a white grandmother, who had been taken captive, she told them, 30 years ago. It was her voice that had translated for Miss Denna. 30 years, thought Mercy. She imagined herself growing old here. No, it could not happen to her. At last they let Sally's husband in. He was pale and shaken and loaded with presents that Indian men had given him in honor of the event. Miss Denna arranged the gifts where they could be admired. Mercy was dumbfounded to see a beautiful imported wool dress, fine furs, bracelets of silver, and a cradle board so delicately carved she did not think a Deerfield craftsman could duplicate it. It was not new. It had been cherished by some Indian parent for some Indian child. How strange the Indians were. They rejoiced over this birth, they who would not let other babies live. "Benjamin," said Sally to her husband, lifting her face for his kiss. Her joy filled the room. "Come look at our son. He's perfect. It wasn't hard at all. Everything's fine." Mercy could not imagine how Benjamin felt, his son born among Indians. No house for the boy to grow up in, no farm for him to work, no grandparents, just captivity. But from their faces, neither Sally nor Benjamin cared. She remembered the last day of her mother's life, the new baby Mara handed over to a neighbor to nurse, and mother telling Mercy goodbye. Childbirth was so dangerous. Please, God, let Sally be fine. Please, God, let the baby stay well. And then in came Father Muriel, also carrying packages, which turned out to be a folding table, a white cloth embroidered in white to spread upon it, a cup of silver, and a beautifully bound leather book. Mercy feasted her eyes on the beautiful things. How Mother would have loved that white cloth with its white needlework. But there was a grim reason why ministers came to a birth. The baby must be baptized in case he died. If he had not been baptized, God would not take his little soul, but Catholic souls were damned. A baptism from Father Muriel would be worse than letting the baby die unbaptized. And yet, what if the baby died and his soul floated hopelessly for eternity? Should they let this man that Ruth said was going to hell put his magic cross on the baby? But he was a man of God. Oh, how Mercy wished for Mr. Williams. "I'm not Catholic," said Sarah, trying to hide the baby under her sheets. Father Muriel opened his leather book. It was a church record for a name and a date in order to preserve the child's soul forever and ever. Sally's husband Benjamin touched the book, overwhelmed by fear for his little boy. "Yes, baptize him, please, Father Muriel," said Benjamin. He looked desperately at his wife, who, after several amazed and horrified moments, nodded. "His name will be Christopher, then," said Sally. Please stop here and answer question 9. "His name will be Christopher, then," said Sally. "Bearer of Christ. Will you say it in English as well as French, Father Muriel? I want it to hold." "I will say it in 4 languages," said Father Muriel, "for you are among Indians who also love your son, and I promise that it will hold." "But," said Mercy, although it was rude to interrupt, That's just 3 languages, English, French, and Mohawk. Marie, he said, remembering her with a smile, the church has yet another language. It is called Latin. And there, in the hut of Mohawk Indians, an English Puritan was baptized in Latin by a French Catholic priest, and then baptized in French, in Mohawk, and finally in English. The baby was safe. The baptism would hold. The whole room felt it and knew it. Thank you, whispered Sally. When the priest had packed up and most of the women had left and the men had taken Benjamin out with them, Mercy asked, Father Muriel, what does Nstenna mean? It means mother. How nice, said Sally, breaking into another glowing smile. They were all congratulating me on being a mother. Christopher, she crooned to her son, I'm your Nstenna. The woman who had called herself Nstenna was folding the messy delivery cloths and putting them in a basket to carry away, probably to wash in a river. How dare you, thought Mercy. Do you think you can adopt me? Do you think I will cave in as easily as Sally and Benjamin caved in to that Catholic priest? Do you think I will throw away my real mother? Do you think I will ever call you by that sacred name? She stumbled outside to cool her angry heart. She took care to avert her eyes from the French flag in the Catholic church. She turned until she was facing southward. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh thy help. O Lord, send help from Boston. Ransom us. Please stop here and answer question 10.